I froze to death in a commercial freezer, and the next thing I felt was both palms stuck to an ice slab in front of 300 laughing students. The examiner told me to summon a beast before my fingers thawed, which meant the universe had apparently developed a very specific sense of humor. I pulled my hands free and lost a thin layer of skin. Nobody cared. The arena was bright and warm enough to make my ice block sweat. 300 students watched with fire cats, stone hounds, and a silver hawk that looked expensive enough to own property. Bren stood closest to the railing. He had broad shoulders, a perfect academy coat, and a red-scaled lizard the size of a horse. He looked at my ice block, then at me. "That is your catalyst?" The students around him laughed. Dorian, the examiner, did not laugh. That made it worse. He checked the paper in his hand and spoke in the flat voice of a man reading a list of spoiled vegetables. Calder, no contracted spirit, no inherited beast, manifestation category unknown, produce a viable familiar and complete the movement test. I looked at the ice. Somewhere in the new memories inside my head, I knew what my hands could do. I had not chosen this body, but the body knew how to carve. I picked up the small knife beside the block and cut. A wolf emerged from the ice. It was not impressive. It was the length of my forearm, with thick legs, a square head, and one ear slightly larger than the other because my hands were still numb. The arena became quiet for 2 seconds. Then the wolf sneezed. Bren laughed so hard his lizard turned to look at him. I placed the wolf on the floor, its eyes lit with pale blue light. It took one step, then another. It ran toward the first marker, jumped over a wooden bar, landed badly, rolled once, got up, and kept going. That was when I noticed the lines. Thin white threads appeared inside its body after every movement. One line formed along the front legs after the jump. Another curled through its spine after the roll. They looked like cracks, except they were too regular. The wolf reached the second marker. Then its back legs became water. The arena was warm. Of course it was warm. The test floor was designed for ordinary summoned beasts, not something that had the structural confidence of a dessert left in the sun. My wolf slid forward on its belly, tried to bite the last marker, and melted into a clear puddle. The entire first-year class exploded with laughter. Bren stepped down from the spectator line before Dorian stopped him. He walked to the puddle, placed his boot beside it, and set his metal drinking cup directly in the center of the water. "Perfect," he said. "It can hold my drink cold." More laughter. I watched the water spread around his boot. Dorian marked the paper. "Failed." I looked up. The rules allow a second attempt if the familiar is destroyed by the environment rather than an opponent. His eyes moved to me at last. The rule applies to viable familiars. Yours ceased to exist during basic movement. It completed 2 markers, and then became floor maintenance. That line got another laugh. Even Dorian had jokes. Mine just had worse timing. A girl near the 3rd row did not laugh. Elin was thin, dark-haired, and had a small white bird perched on one wrist. I did not know why I remembered her name. This body's memories did. She watched the puddle instead of Bren. Dorian raised his voice. "Final academy placement. Calder, rank 312, last place. No combat allocation, no standard familiar stipend. Assigned to auxiliary labor until review." A crystal board above the arena changed. My name dropped to the bottom. 312. The reaction was immediate. Students pointed. Someone clapped. Bren bowed toward me as if I had won an award for being terrible. I crouched and started collecting the water. That made them laugh again. I used the metal cup Bren had placed in the puddle. He stared at me. "You are actually keeping it?" "The cup too, if you leave it there." The first few people near us stopped laughing. Bren's face tightened. He snatched the cup from my hand. I found an empty glass bottle near the examiner's table and gathered as much water as I could. Elin came down without speaking and handed me a clean cloth. I used it to guide the last thin streams into the bottle. "You missed some under the marker," she said. That was all. No pity, no speech, just useful information. I collected it. By sunset, everyone knew about the ice wolf that became a drink cooler. Someone had drawn a puddle beside my name on the ranking board. Bren sat at rank 17. I was given a basement room in the old sculpture club because the regular summoner dorm was full, and apparently last place did not require sunlight. The room was cold. For the first time that day, something went right. The basement held cracked tables, rusted tools, a drain, 2 old freezing cabinets, and a sink that groaned like it resented employment. A faded sign said the sculpture club had once served academy festivals. Now it contained dust, 3 chairs, and 1 dead beetle. I set the bottle on a table. The system finally spoke. 3 advancement paths surfaced in my mind: Ice Sculptor, Keeper of Forms, and Emperor of Frost Beasts. Ice Sculptor promised harder creations. Emperor of Frost Beasts promised raw command power after I controlled 10 stable summons. Keeper of Forms offered no damage bonus. Its one effect was simple: water from a creature I personally carved could retain traces of that creature's actions after melting. I chose Keeper of Forms. The world would have called it the weakest path. I had already seen what the world thought of weak ice. The bottle held a little under 2 kilograms. The original block had been exactly 2. About 50 grams were already gone. I poured the water into a wolf-shaped mold I carved from packed snow and placed it in the freezing cabinet. Nothing happened for 20 minutes. I ate the dinner sent to auxiliary students: thick potato soup, roasted onion, black bread, and a piece of chicken with crisp skin. It was simple food. But after dying in a freezer and being reborn into public humiliation, hot soup felt like a religious experience. I was tearing bread into the bowl when the cabinet door clicked. I opened it. The wolf stood inside. Same oversized ear, same square head, same white lines inside its legs and spine. It opened its eyes. Then it jumped out before I touched it. I stopped chewing. The wolf ran to the edge of the table, saw the drop, backed up 3 steps, accelerated, and jumped to the chair. It landed cleanly. The line in its front legs brightened. I put the spoon down. Again. The wolf looked at me. I pointed at the table. It jumped back. Clean landing. The first wolf had fallen after its first jump. This one had corrected the angle. I made a simple obstacle from 2 chairs and a broom handle. The wolf crossed it 6 times. On the 7th, I moved the broom slightly higher. It hesitated, then it jumped harder. That was not a preset movement. That was adaptation. I tested until midnight and found the rule. When one of my carved creatures melted, its water retained roughly 1/5 of what it had experienced. Refreeze the same water, and the new body remembered part of the old one's actions. That was my one advantage. Memory. I tested the price with a candle. The wolf learned to retreat from heat, then carried that fear into the next body. Every complete cycle lost about 50 grams of usable water. After 5 bodies, it crossed obstacles alone. After 8, it watched my shoulders before I threw a cloth ball. After 10, it moved before my hand released it. The original 2 kilograms had become roughly 1.5. Half a kilogram of mass for 10 lives of experience. If I kept training forever, I would eventually own the smartest ice cube in the world. I slept for 3 hours on 2 club benches pushed together. At dawn, someone knocked. It was not Elin. It was Bren. Behind him stood 6 students from our year. He held the public ranking sheet in one hand. "Auxiliary labor starts today," he said. "I heard last place was assigned pest control under the food warehouses." His smile widened. "Try not to melt before the rats do." The students laughed. My wolf stood behind the table where they could not see it. It was on its 10th body. It had spent most of the night learning how humans moved before they threw things. Bren casually flicked a copper coin at my forehead. The wolf moved first. It leaped from behind the table, caught the coin in its mouth, landed on the chair, and dropped it neatly into my soup bowl from the night before. Nobody laughed. Bren stared. The wolf stared back. Then the white lines inside its body brightened like a tiny frozen nervous system. I picked up the coin. "Thanks," I said. My first income. By breakfast, the story had changed. The puddle wolf had caught a coin in midair. By the time I reached the warehouse district under the academy, it had apparently caught a knife. Rumors improved faster than my rank. Tobin managed the academy's cold storage rooms. He was a wide man with rolled sleeves, flour on his coat, and the expression of someone who had personally declared war on rodents. He showed me 3 rooms full of meat, cheese, fruit, and sacks of grain. "Your assignment is simple," he said. "Keep the temperature down and kill anything with a tail that did not arrive on an invoice." "What is the pay?" He blinked. "Auxiliary students get meals." "For the assigned hours. What about after?" His eyes narrowed with interest. "The academy gave me no stipend. Water, salt, and tools cost money, and experience literally evaporated. I needed a business before revenge." Tobin scratched his beard. "If you keep the 3rd storage room below the required temperature through the night, 12 silver. If you clear the rats without poison, 30 silver. Poison ruins stock." "Done." He pointed at my small wolf. "With that?" "With that." He looked at the wolf, then at me. "I have seen spoons larger than that. Most spoons are poorly trained." He laughed once and slapped the doorframe. That afternoon became my first real training ground. The warehouse held 37 rats. The first bit the wolf's ear, the second escaped through a pipe, the third knocked it from a shelf. I melted the damaged body, refroze the water, and started again. The new wolf avoided the bite, waited beside the pipe, and climbed stacked crates before the third rat could escape. Tobin watched from the doorway. By the 10th kill, the wolf predicted instead of chased. By the 20th, it used noise to drive rats between aisles. By the 30th, it was herding them like a frozen shepherd with anger issues. 3 kitchen workers stopped to watch the last rat run along a hanging chain. My wolf bounced from a sack to a crate, caught the chain, swung under it, and kicked the rat into an empty basket. The workers shouted. Tobin stared at the basket. That thing learned. Yes. Summons do not learn that fast. Mine melts faster, too. Balanced design. He paid me 30 silver in front of all 3 workers. Then he added 12 for the overnight cooling contract before the night had even started. 42 silver. My first actual earnings in this world. I spent 8 immediately on clean water, 3 on salt, and 5 on 2 new carving knives. 26 remained. Strength rose, resources rose, reputation rose, and the academy noticed. When I returned to the ranking hall that evening, a small crowd stood in front of the board. My rank had moved from 312 to 298 because auxiliary performance counted toward academy contribution, 14 places from killing rats and cooling cheese. Brent stood near the board. He saw me. He saw the wolf beside my boot. Then he saw the group of warehouse workers telling students how it had cleared 37 rats without poison. His expression changed. That was enough for me. I would have walked away. Bren did not let me. A pest hunter is still a pest hunter, he said loudly. People turned. Good. Witnesses. He pointed toward the small practice circle beside the ranking hall. My familiar against yours. 1 exchange. If your toy stays standing, I will admit the exam result was unfair. His red lizard appeared beside him in a burst of heat. My wolf immediately began melting at the paws. The crowd laughed again, but less confidently this time. I checked the water flask at my belt. 1 kilogram. 450 grams remained from the original body, 10 reincarnations, 37 rats, hundreds of observed movements. The wolf looked at the lizard. Then it looked at Bren's shoulders. I understood what it was watching. Bren raised his right hand. The lizard lowered its head, the same signal he had used in the exam before ordering a charge. My wolf had watched him throw the coin that morning. It had watched human shoulders all day. Bren chopped his hand forward. The lizard charged. My wolf moved before the command finished. It ran directly toward the larger beast. The crowd gasped. At the last instant, it slid under the lizard's chest, jumped onto its rear leg, climbed its back, and bit the thin ridge behind its jaw. The lizard twisted. My wolf released before the counterattack. It landed behind Bren's boots. Then it sat. The lizard had crossed the practice boundary. My wolf had not. 1 exchange. Bren's familiar was out. For 2 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then the ranking hall erupted. Students shouted that the wolf had predicted the command and beaten rank 17 without taking a hit. Bren's face became almost the same color as his lizard. I pointed at him. You promised. The crowd went quiet enough to hear the wall clock. He swallowed. His challenge was not pure arrogance. His family had paid heavily for the lizard contract, and my cheap wolf made that investment look foolish. I understood the motive. It did not change his promise. Bren looked at the watching students. The exam result was unfair, he said. Louder voices immediately demanded he repeat it. His jaw tightened. The exam result was unfair. The crystal board above us flashed. My contribution score increased again. My rank moved from 298 to 271, 27 more places. Bren dropped from 17 to 21 because practice losses affected combat evaluation. That was the first time I learned public humiliation had measurable weight. I returned to the basement with 42 silver, 41 ranks gained, and a new white line around the wolf's skull. Elin was waiting outside the club door with 2 bowls of noodles. You skipped dinner, she said. I was busy becoming a rat tycoon. She handed me a bowl. The noodles were thick and soft, covered in brown broth with sliced beef, green onion, and a boiled egg cut cleanly in half. Steam filled the cold room. The wolf climbed onto the table, approached the bowl, and immediately retreated from the heat. Elin watched it. It remembered the candle. I looked at her. She looked at the bottle of meltwater beside my hand. Everyone else watches the beast, she said. You watch the water. For the first time, someone had seen the real mechanism. I did not answer immediately. The wolf tapped the cold side of my bowl with one paw, apparently hoping the beef would migrate toward safer temperatures. Aelin smiled. Then the floor under us made a sound. A deep crack. Not stone, ice. The wolf froze in place. The white line around its skull lit brighter than ever. It turned toward the drain in the floor, and something far below the club scratched back. The next morning I woke with my carving knife in one hand and the wolf sitting on my chest like a very cold debt collector. The sound under the floor had not returned, but the wolf refused to go near the drain. That was new. Fear could survive the cycle too. I added it to the list in my head and went to work. The second day had 3 goals. Earn enough money to keep training, raise my academy contribution above the bottom quarter, find out why an ice creature with no survival instinct beyond what I taught it was afraid of the foundation. Money came first because mysteries did not sell clean water. Tobin met me at the warehouse with a problem. The cooling crystals in 2 storage rooms had cracked overnight. Replacing them would cost the academy more than 100 gold. Until then, several tons of food were at risk. "Can your little beast cool a room?" he asked. "No." His shoulders fell. "But I can make something that can." I spent 6 silver on buckets of purified water and 4 on salt. I carved 8 squat ice beetles, each the size of a fist, with wide backs and hollow bellies. I placed salted ice inside the cavities and gave each beetle one command. Walk slowly along the storage walls and return to the basin when the shell became thin. They were not strong. They did not need to be. The first cycle lasted 40 minutes. The second lasted 46 because the beetles learned to avoid warm spots near the doors. The third lasted 53 because they began walking through the coldest shadows. By midday, the room temperature had dropped enough to protect the food. Tobin brought 6 workers to watch the 4th cycle. The beetles moved in a clean line around the wall, rotating positions so the most melted bodies returned first. Nobody had taught them to rotate. They had learned from repeated failure. One worker whispered, "They are managing themselves." Tobin paid me 12 silver for the original overnight agreement, then offered 2 gold for both damaged rooms until the crystals were replaced. "Per day," I said. He stared at me. "You were last place yesterday." "Yesterday I had lower operating costs." He laughed so loudly, one beetle walked into a bucket. "We settled at 2 gold per day, plus water supplied by the warehouse." That changed everything. Free water removed my largest cost. By noon, I had earned 2 gold and 12 silver for cooling work, spent only 10 silver, and gained 8 new familiars that were slowly building environmental memory. Then I used them for pest control. The rats had learned to fear the wolf. They had not learned to fear furniture. The beetles blocked tunnels while the wolf hunted. 3 warehouse workers watched the entire operation. By the end, 32 more pests were gone, and Tobin added another 20 silver bonus because not a single sack had been damaged. My contribution score rose again. When I reached the Academy ranking board after lunch, I was ranked 246, 66 places above where I had started. The puddle drawing beside my name had been changed. Someone had added teeth. I approved. Elin met me there. Her white bird sat on her shoulder and pecked at a piece of apple. "Dorian wants to see you," she said. "That sounds expensive." It probably is. Dorian's office overlooked the training courts. He had the same paper from the exam on his desk, including the word "failed" written beside my name. Bren was there too. So was Mara, the faculty supervisor responsible for student clubs. Mara had silver hair cut short and hands stained with charcoal. She looked less interested in my rank than in the carving knife at my belt. Dorian gestured to a chair. I stayed standing. He folded his hands. "There are concerns that your ice constructs are not true familiars." Bren's mouth twitched. There it was. His first loss had been public. His answer was institutional. Reasonable. If he could have my creatures classified as tools, my practice victory would not count, and my contribution points could be removed. Dorian continued. Academy rules define a familiar as an autonomous summoned entity capable of receiving commands, adapting to combat, and maintaining a magical bond with its summoner. Your constructs appear to be animated objects. Then test them. Mara looked at me for the first time. Dorian frowned. "We are testing them." "No, you are discussing words in an office. Put the test in the ranking hall." Bren turned toward me. I kept my voice calm. "Yesterday, 300 students watched you call my familiar non-viable. Today they should watch you decide whether it qualifies." Dorian's eyes hardened. He had a motive too. If I was right, his exam decision looked careless. If he reversed it quietly, people would say pressure changed his ruling. A public test was dangerous for him. That was why it was useful for me. Mara leaned back. I support a public test. Bren looked at her. She shrugged. If the Academy is correct, we lose nothing. If Calder is correct, we stop looking foolish sooner. Dorian's face did not move. This afternoon, 3 trials. Command response, independent adaptation, combat viability. Good. Bren smiled. Use the wolf. I looked at him. Why? Because that is the familiar you used in the exam, unless you need a different toy every day. He thought he was trapping me. He was almost right. The wolf had lost more mass that morning. Only 1 kilogram, 300 grams of the original water remained. Every serious cycle cost about 50 grams. I could not keep throwing its best body into public tests forever. But the rule never said I needed to keep 1 memory in 1 body. That thought arrived while Bren was still smiling. I left the office and went directly to the club. Elin followed. You have 4 hours, she said. Enough. I melted the wolf in a cold basin. Then I did something I had not tried. I divided the water into 3 equal portions. Each portion weighed a little over 400 grams. I carved 3 smaller wolves. When they froze, all 3 woke. The first immediately watched my shoulders. The second tested the edge of the table before jumping. The third went directly to the candle and barked at it. Elin stared. They remember different things. Not different things exactly. Different parts. I tested them. The first retained combat prediction. The second retained movement and balance. The third retained environmental danger and hunting habits. The original memory had split. That was the second consequence of my ability. 1 veteran could become specialists. The price was obvious. Each body was smaller and weaker, so I trained them as a unit. 1 watched me. 1 watched the obstacle. 1 watched the exits. After 2 cycles, they stopped colliding. After 3, they began moving in sequence. Elin stood at the far side of the room and threw soft cloth balls from random angles. The first wolf read her shoulder. The second moved to intercept. The third adjusted if the first prediction failed. The system was not magic inside magic. It was experience shared through roles. At noon, Elin opened a paper bag. Inside were hot meat pies. The crust was crisp and buttery. Steam carried the smell of pepper, onion, and roasted beef into the cold room. All 3 wolves stared at the bag. The third backed away first. The other 2 followed because they had learned to trust its environmental judgment. Elin laughed. They formed a committee against lunch. Smartest committee I have seen. We ate at the carving table while the wolves practiced jumping between chair backs. She asked 1 question. How much water do you lose? About 50 grams each full cycle for the original mass, less for smaller bodies, but the percentage is painful. So every lesson costs you. Yes. She looked at the 3 wolves differently after that, not as infinite summons, as something I spent. That mattered more than admiration. The public test began after lunch. The ranking hall filled before Dorian arrived. Someone had spread the rumor that my points might be erased. Students packed the balconies. Warehouse workers came up in their aprons. Tobin stood near the back holding a cheese knife because apparently he had not had time to put it down. Bren stood beside the practice circle with his red lizard. Dorian stepped onto the floor. Mara carried the official scoring crystal. First trial, Dorian said. Command response. I placed the 3 tiny wolves on the floor. The laughter started immediately. 3 smaller wolves looked worse than 1. Bren leaned toward another student and said loudly, he diluted the failure. I heard him. So did everyone. Dorian gave me 10 randomized commands. Forward. Stop. Circle left. Guard. Return. The wolves completed all 10. Then Dorian deliberately changed the order faster than normal. They still completed all 10. 20 commands. Perfect. The hall quieted. Mara announced the result. Full command score. The crystal board gave me 12 contribution points. My rank moved from 246 to 231. First shock. Dorian's jaw tightened. Second trial, independent adaptation. Workers rolled out a changing obstacle course. Platforms moved. Bars fell at random. Bells rang from false exits. My 3 wolves started. The movement specialist went first. The combat specialist watched falling bars. The danger specialist ignored the bells and tracked the real path by cold airflow from the open exit. Halfway through, Dorian changed the course manually. A platform rotated early. The first wolf slipped. The second shoved it back with its shoulder. The third changed direction before the next bar fell. They finished in 41 seconds. The academy requirement was 90. The previous first-year record was 58. Nobody laughed. Tobin raised the cheese knife over his head and shouted, "That is my pest team." The warehouse workers cheered. Mara announced another 20 contribution points. My rank moved to 194, 37 places in one test. Second shock. Dorian looked at Bren. Bren nodded once. Combat viability. His lizard entered the circle. Of course. The crowd reacted immediately. Yesterday the wolf had won by boundary rule. Today they expected a real fight. Dorian raised one hand. Combat ends when one familiar is immobilized or leaves the ring. No lethal commands. Bren smiled at me. 3 against 1. Fair enough. I looked at his lizard. It had heat shimmering above its scales. My wolves were already sweating onto the floor. The danger specialist backed away. Good. It remembered fire. Bren gave the charge signal. The combat wolf moved before the lizard. But this time it did not attack. It ran left. The movement wolf ran right. The danger wolf stayed in front. The lizard chose the closest target and charged the danger wolf. At the last second, it jumped aside. The lizard slid across meltwater from the other 2 wolves. Its rear feet lost traction. The movement wolf hit one ankle. The combat wolf hit the other. The lizard fell onto its side. The danger wolf climbed onto its head and placed one tiny paw directly on its eye ridge. Not enough weight to hurt it. Enough to prove position. Dorian called the match. The hall erupted. Bren stood frozen. His lizard had been defeated by 3 creatures that together weighed less than a kitchen roast. Mara lifted the scoring crystal. Combat viability confirmed. Familiar classification confirmed. The board flashed. My original exam failure changed to provisional pass. My combat allocation unlocked. My familiar stipend unlocked. And my rank moved to 159. 153 places above last. Students shouted my name. The same people who had laughed at a puddle now pushed toward the railing to see the wolves. That was the part I remembered most. Not the victory. The correction. Public failure had made me a joke. Public proof made the joke expensive. Bren walked toward me after the crowd began to settle. His face was pale. He did not insult me. That would have been easier. "You are making contracted familiars look obsolete," he said quietly. "Do you understand that?" There was the motive underneath everything. His family had spent more than 200 gold securing the lizard contract. Students built their futures around rare beasts. If a basement sculptor could make cheap ice learn faster, sponsors and faculty would panic. "I am making my familiars work," I said. "People will come after the method. Then they should bring buckets." He almost smiled despite himself. Almost. Dorian did not. Before I left, he announced a new inspection. "Until the source and safety of these constructs are confirmed, the old sculpture club will be reviewed for closure." There it was. I had won the test. The response moved one level higher. Mara's expression hardened. "The club is under my supervision." "And it has unpaid maintenance debt," Dorian said. 24 gold. If the debt is not cleared by the review tomorrow, the room returns to academy control. The crowd heard every word. 24 gold. I had less than 3. Strength had risen, status had risen, resources had risen, but not enough. The academy had found the scale where I was still weak. Money. That evening, I went back to the warehouse. Tobin listened while cutting a wheel of hard cheese. 24 gold by tomorrow? Yes. That is not a debt. That is a murder attempt wearing accounting clothes. Can you pay more for cooling? No. Can you introduce me to anyone who can? He stopped cutting. Then he smiled. The grain merchants under the east wall have a moth problem. No poison allowed. They lost 60 gold of flour last month. I looked at my 3 wolves. The hunting memories were spread between them. Then I looked at the 8 beetles circling the storage wall. Different bodies, different skills, same ice. A plan formed. By midnight I had carved 20 tiny birds from clean warehouse water. They had no experience. Yet, I melted the danger wolf. Instead of freezing its water back into a wolf, I poured part of it into a bird mold. The bird froze. It woke. It stood on 2 thin legs. Then it tried to run like a wolf. It took 3 steps, tripped over its own wings, and fell face first into a bowl. Elin covered her mouth. I stared at it. The bird lifted its head and looked offended by anatomy. The white memory lines inside its body were there. Transferred. That was the third consequence. Experience did not belong to a shape. It belonged to the water. I had just given a bird the memories of a wolf, and under the club floor, Far below us, the ancient ice cracked again. This time, the sound came from every wall at once. On the third day, I owed 24 gold by sunset, had 20 birds that believed they were wolves, and ranked 159 in an academy where I had been last 2 mornings earlier. It looked like progress until I checked my wallet. I started before sunrise. The grain warehouse under the east wall was 3 times larger than Tobin's cold storage and warm enough to kill my normal constructs quickly. Pale moths covered the rafters. Their larvae ate flour. Their wings spread dust into every corner. The owner had already lost more than 60 gold in 1 month. No poison was allowed near the food. That was why Tobin had brought me. First section pays 8 gold, he said. Second pays 8. Main flower chamber pays 10. 26 total. If you finish before sunset. I need 24. Then try not to spend 25 getting it. Useful advice. The first flight of my new icebirds was terrible. The lead bird had inherited too much wolf memory. It jumped from my hand, tried to push off with legs that did not exist, spun sideways, and hit a sack of flour. 2 workers laughed. The second bird opened its wings too late and landed face first in a bucket. More workers came to watch. Good. Every failure had witnesses. That meant every correction would too. I started the cycles, 4 birds at a time. 12 minutes of flight before the warehouse heat softened them. Chilled trays under the rafters caught most of the meltwater. I filtered out flour and refroze it. The first cycle taught balance. The second taught wing control. The third taught landing. The fourth taught pursuit. The fifth taught them that frightened moths turn toward light. That was the useful lesson. I hung 3 cold lamps over open barrels. The birds stopped chasing individual insects. They began driving whole clouds toward the lights. One group frightened moths from the rafters. Another blocked the side routes. A third waited near the barrels. The workers stopped laughing. By mid-morning, 20 tiny icebirds moved through the beams in waves. A moth cloud tried to split around a support post. 2 birds crossed above it. 4 drove from behind. The cloud turned toward the lamp and dropped into the barrel. The warehouse workers shouted, "First section cleared. 8 gold. Tobin paid me in front of everyone. I put the coins directly into a belt pouch. My strength had risen because the birds were learning. My resources had risen by 8 gold. My reputation rose before I even left the room because one worker ran to the street to tell people the last place student had trained icebirds to herd moths. Then the second section fought back. The moths there nested inside narrow roof gaps. Birds could reach them, but the warm air near the ceiling melted wings almost twice as fast. After 2 cycles, I had lost nearly 500 grams of trained water. That was too expensive. I stopped. One worker frowned. Giving up? Calculating. I looked at the 8 cold storage beetles I'd brought in buckets. The birds knew how moths moved. The beetles knew how to hold cold roots along walls. The memory did not belong to the shape. I melted 2 trained birds and mixed a small amount of their water into 4 beetle molds. The new beetles woke. The first one immediately tried to look upward while running and walked into a crate. The workers laughed again. The second spun in a circle because some part of it apparently expected wings. Then the fragments adapted. The beetles could not fly, but they began predicting where moths would descend after a bird attack. I placed them along the lower beams and barrel rims. The birds drove insects downward. The beetles blocked the escape points. The next moth cloud lasted less than 1 minute. The workers cheered louder than before because they had seen the bad version first. That was the difference between a private miracle and a public one. People trusted progress when they watched it fail on the way up. Second section cleared. Another 8 gold, 16 total. I still needed 8. The main flower chamber was hotter than the rest of the warehouse. Sunlight heated the roof from above, and the flower dust held warmth like a blanket. My birds began thinning after 8 minutes. One shattered against a beam. Another melted in flight and rained cold water over Bren's head. I had not noticed him arrive. He stood below the rafters with 4 Academy observers sent by Dorian. Water ran down his face. The workers went silent. Bren wiped his cheek. I am going to pretend that was not deliberate. Good. I am going to pretend I could have aimed that well. The workers laughed. He looked up at the birds. His expression changed. Those are using the wolf's experience. He had noticed faster than most. Some of it. You can move training between forms. Some training. The body still has to learn what the memory means. He looked at one beetle predicting moth landings. His red lizard contract had cost his family more than 200 gold. It could not become a bird tomorrow. It could not become a beetle next week. For the first time, Bren looked less angry than worried. If this scales, contracts change. If this scales, I need more buckets. He did not laugh. That told me he understood the threat better than I did. Aylin arrived near noon carrying 2 insulated jugs and a cloth bag. Tobin had sent word that I was spending water too fast. One jug held clean ice, the other held hot chicken broth with noodles, ginger, green herbs, and shredded meat. The bag contained crisp bread brushed with garlic oil. I drank broth while standing beside a tray of melting birds. It was hot enough to make my face sweat. Around me, ice creatures died from heat and were rebuilt from their own water. The situation was ridiculous. The lunch was excellent. Elin watched me weigh the remaining trained water. How much did you lose? Almost 1 kilogram since sunrise. How much money so far? 16 gold. And the club debt is 24. Yes. She looked at the main chamber. Then you cannot solve this by spending birds until the room is empty. I know. She pointed toward the moth barrels. They escape from the top whenever your birds melt. The beetles survive longer near the floor. I looked at her, then at the barrels. That was the answer. Not stronger creatures, better jobs. I melted 4 beetles and added tiny amounts of bird water to each. Then I carved wide-backed beetles with hooked feet so they could climb the barrel rims. They woke with partial hunting memory. The first one tried to leap toward a moth and fell into the barrel. Bren snorted. Excellent capital-level technique. It is still ahead of your lizard at pest control. The workers laughed at him. Public face slap number 1 for the day. Small but useful. The next beetle did better. After one cycle, all 4 understood their role. The birds no longer needed to finish the hunt. They only needed to push moths toward the barrels. The beetles sealed the exits. Cold tortoise shells placed under the traps slowed melting. 3 different forms did one job together. The main chamber fell in 40 minutes. When the final moth cloud dropped into the trap, more than 30 workers shouted at once. One of Dorian's observers actually climbed onto a flour sack to see the last capture. Tobin handed me 10 gold, 26 total. I had begun the morning with less than 3 gold. Now I held more than 29. I paid Tobin 1 gold for supplies and promised another gold as his introduction fee. More than 27 remained, enough to save the club. The observers wrote everything down. That mattered. Dorian could argue with me. He could not easily argue with his own witnesses. By the time we returned to the academy, the story had arrived first. The ranking hall was packed. Someone had replaced the puddle sketch beside my name with a flower-covered icebird. My contribution points from the warehouse contract had already been recorded. Rank 128. I had moved 184 places in less than 3 days. Students stood around the board reading the number aloud. Bren heard them. His mouth tightened, but he said nothing. He had learned not to challenge a number in front of a crowd unless he knew how the number would move next. The club review began 1 hour before sunset. Mara stood outside the basement door with her arms folded. Dorian arrived with 2 administrative clerks. Ellen stayed beside me. Tobin brought 6 warehouse workers because he claimed official events required snacks and witnesses. More than 100 students filled the corridor. Dorian read the notice aloud. The Sculpture Club owes 24 gold in accumulated maintenance fees. If unpaid by sunset, the room returns to Academy control. He looked at me. Do you contest the debt? No. A murmur moved through the crowd. Dorian extended one hand. Then the club closes. I placed a leather bag in his palm. The coins hit hard enough to ring. 24 gold. Silence. Dorian opened the bag. He counted. Everyone watched him count. That was the point. 1 gold, 5, 10, 15, 20, 24. Mara smiled slightly. Dorian looked up. Where did you obtain this money? A warehouse worker shouted before I answered. He earned it. Another yelled. Saved our flour. Tobin raised both hands. I arranged the contract and paid him. The corridor erupted. Yesterday, I had been a poor auxiliary student with a melting toy. Today, the same ability had paid an academy debt in cash, in front of the people who had watched me work for it. Dorian could not call it charity. He could not call it family money. He gave the bag to the clerk. Debt cleared. The students cheered. The contribution board updated. Rank 109, top third of the year. 3 students near the back immediately asked Mara whether the Sculpture Club was accepting members. That reaction surprised me more than the rank. 2 days earlier, nobody wanted to be seen near my basement. Now people were arguing over who had first said the wolf looked useful. Mara raised one hand. No new members until the safety review is finished. The students groaned. Tobin leaned toward me. Congratulations, you have invented popularity and paperwork at the same time. I preferred rats. Bren heard me and almost laughed. The public board flashed once more as the warehouse witnesses submitted their contract verification. My contribution score did not change rank, but the note beside my name changed from auxiliary labor to independent familiar work. That small line mattered. The academy was no longer describing me as someone assigned to carry out low work. It was describing the work as mine. Strength, money, status. All three had moved again before sunset. Dorian waited until the cheering faded. The financial issue is resolved. The safety review is not. Mara's expression cooled. On what basis? Unknown magical persistence, unknown transfer behavior, unknown contamination risk. They were reasonable concerns. That was what made him dangerous. He was not a cartoon villain trying to close a room because he hated ice. He was an examiner whose authority had been publicly challenged by something he did not understand. Fear with rules was still fear. Give me a measurable test, I said. Dorian looked at the crowd. He had learned too. Private decisions were no longer safe around me. Tomorrow. Advanced familiar control field. Environmental hazard, target protection, and combat control. If your constructs pass, the club remains open for the term. And if they fail? All active constructs are temporarily confiscated for study. The corridor reacted sharply. Aelin stepped forward. Including experienced water? Dorian looked at me instead of her. All active magical material. There it was, the next level. He did not only want the room anymore, he wanted the method close enough to inspect. I kept my voice calm. Public test? Public test. Good. The crowd reacted again. Dorian left with the clerks. Bren remained near the stairs. You enjoy making every problem public. People behave better when their promises have witnesses. He looked at the club door. If Dorian gets your water, he will give it to the Academy Research Wing. I know. Then do not lose tomorrow. It was the closest thing to support he had offered. After everyone left, Mara stayed behind. She walked around the basement and touched one old carving stand. This club once had 40 members, she said, before contracted summoning became cheap enough to replace hand-shaped familiars. Why keep the room for 15 years? Habit. I looked at her. She sighed. And because the foundation under this wing is unusual, that got my attention. She pointed at the drain. Do not pour experienced meltwater down there. Why? The academy rests on glacial ice, much older than the buildings. Water finds cracks. We do not know where every channel goes. Ellen looked at me. We both remembered the scratching sound. How old is the glacier? I asked. Older than the oldest complete academy record. Mara left. I waited until her footsteps disappeared. Then I knelt beside the drain. I placed a drop of clean water on the iron grate. Nothing. I placed one drop of experienced meltwater beside it. The drain flashed blue. Every ice creature in the room turned toward the floor. A white line appeared far below us, then another. They were too smooth to be cracks. One curved like a wall, another met it at a perfect right angle. Aelin crouched beside me. That looks carved. It is too large. The floor shuddered. The lines disappeared. Then something struck the underside of the foundation once. Not a scratch this time. A knock. The 20 birds on the table answered together. One tap of ice claws against wood. The room went silent. A second knock came from below. 2 taps answered from the birds. Then a third knock. 3 taps. I stared at them. I had not given that command. The ancient ice under the academy had found a pattern, and my familiars had recognized it. The 4th day began with Dorian announcing that the advanced control test would be held in the central arena instead of the ranking hall. That meant he expected me to fail loudly enough for the whole academy to hear it. I respected the preparation. I prepared harder. The test had 3 stages: survive an environmental hazard field, protect a marked target, defeat a faculty training construct without leaving the boundary. The normal first-year version used 1 familiar. Dorian allowed me to use as many ice creatures as I could control. That sounded generous. It was not. The arena was heated. Bren told me before breakfast. He found me outside the dining hall and spoke without witnesses for once. The floor crystals will hold the arena at 35 degrees. I looked at him. Why are you telling me? Because if you fail normally, I get my reputation back slowly. If your constructs are confiscated, Dorian gets your method, then nobody gets anything back. Useful honesty. Thank you. Do not make me regret it. You already challenged a wolf that weighed less than your lunch. Your regret schedule is full. He stared at me, then walked away. I had 6 hours. Heat meant more bodies would melt faster, so I built specialists instead of complete fighters. 4 thick tortoises carried cold water. 6 birds observed. 8 beetles controlled terrain. 3 wolves handled direct response. 21 bodies total. Most were clean warehouse water with only a small seed of experienced water in each mold. They were weaker than my veteran line, but much cheaper, and even a small memory fragment gave them a head start. Elin helped time them. Bird 7 lasts 16 minutes. Replace the wings with thicker edges. Beetle 3 keeps trying to jump. Too much wolf water. Melt it and dilute. Tortoise 2 bit the chair. I looked over. The tortoise was indeed biting a chair. That one has hunting memory. Keep it. Why? I want to see where this goes. It went nowhere useful, but the tortoise looked extremely committed. At midday, Mara brought us food from the faculty kitchen. Rice, grilled fish with crisp skin, pickled vegetables, and a bowl of sweet bean soup. She set it down without ceremony. The test starts in 2 hours. You are supervising? Yes. Do you think Dorian is wrong? She considered that while breaking apart the fish with chopsticks. I think he is afraid of an unknown method. Fear is not the same as malice, but fear with authority can still crush things. That matched my own conclusion. And you? I am curious. Curiosity with authority can also crush things. Fair. Ellen hid a smile behind her bowl. We ate quietly. The wolves sat far from the hot rice, the birds perched on the freezing cabinet. The chair-biting tortoise had to be moved twice. For 10 minutes, the basement felt like a home instead of a laboratory. Then the arena bells rang. The central stands held more than 1,000 people. Upper-year students had come. Faculty filled the lower rows. Workers from both warehouses stood together behind Tobin. The public ranking board had been moved beside the arena entrance. My current rank was 109. Bren stood at rank 23 after losing points from our matches. He looked deeply offended by mathematics. Silas, the academy director, sat in the highest faculty seat. That changed the scale. Dorian had brought the problem to his superior. Silas watched from the highest seat without expression. Beside him stood Varric, the capital tournament representative, in a white coat trimmed with gold. He looked at our academy like an item he might return for poor quality. The enemy ladder had found its third step. Dorian entered the floor. The purpose of this test is to determine whether Calder's animated ice constructs meet Academy safety and control standards. The crowd murmured. Failure will result in temporary confiscation for controlled study. The boos came from the warehouse workers first. Tobin shouted something about keeping his hands off company property, even though none of the familiars belonged to him. I appreciated the spirit. First stage. Environmental hazard. The floor turned hot. Steam rose around my feet. All 21 constructs began melting at once. The crowd reacted immediately. Dorian had designed the field to attack my weakness directly. Reasonable, cruel, effective. I gave one command. Rotate. The tortoises moved to the center. Birds landed on their shells. Beetles formed a ring around them. Wolves moved outside. The cold water stored inside the tortoises flowed through carved channels under their shells and cooled the smaller bodies during contact. The group moved as one cluster from cold marker to cold marker, not fast, efficient. Every time a wolf softened, it rotated inward. Every time a bird needed altitude, it launched from a tortoise shell instead of the hot floor. The crowd stopped murmuring. The hazard timer reached 5 minutes, then 10. First-year requirement was 8. We passed. Dorian did not stop the field. 15 minutes. The first bird lost one wing. Another caught it in midair and carried it to the center. 20 minutes. One beetle collapsed. The chair-biting tortoise picked it up in its mouth and kept walking. The stands exploded with laughter and cheers. At 23 minutes, Dorian ended the field. Mara announced the result. Environmental stage passed at nearly 3 times first-year standard. Contribution score rose. My rank moved from 109 to 94. Top 100. The crystal board flashed beside the arena. 1,000 people saw it. First shock. Varric leaned toward Silas and said something I could not hear. Second stage, protect the target. A glass pillar rose from the center of the arena. 6 training drones appeared around the boundary. They fired blunt magical bolts strong enough to shatter ordinary ice. I had to protect the pillar for 10 minutes. The first volley came from 3 directions. My birds saw it. The wolves moved. The beetles did something new. They climbed the pillar. Their bodies spread meltwater across the glass, creating a thin frozen layer as the tortoises cooled the base. I had never ordered that. They had spent days learning to protect warehouse walls from warm air and block escape routes around barrels. Now they interpreted the pillar as a wall that needed sealing. Experience transferred across context. That was the fourth consequence. Memory did not store instructions. It stored patterns. The drones fired again. A bolt hit the ice layer. It cracked. Two beetles immediately moved to the damage point and froze themselves into the gap. They became armor. The crowd gasped. One of the wolves jumped into a drone's firing line, took a bolt, shattered, and sprayed water across the floor. A bird dipped low through the spray. Its feet froze some of the water into a slick patch. The next drone slid when it repositioned. A tortoise rammed it out of alignment. The defense became improvisation built from 3 days of tiny experiences. Dorian increased the drone speed at 8 minutes and added a seventh at 9. At 10, the glass pillar still stood. The stands rose. Mara announced the pass, and my rank moved to 76. Dorian looked up at Silas. Silas gave one small nod. Third stage, faculty combat construct. The arena doors opened. A stone lion walked out. It weighed more than all my ice creatures combined by several hundred times. The crowd became quiet. Bren swore under his breath near the rail. The first-year training construct was supposed to be a wooden hound. Dorian had chosen an upper-year unit. Mara turned on him. That is not the listed construct. Dorian did not look away from me. Director authorization. Everyone looked at Silas. Silas spoke from the high seat. The method has already exceeded first-year standards. A first-year test no longer answers the question. That was fair enough to be frightening. If I wanted recognition beyond first-year limits, I had to accept tests beyond them. Varric smiled for the first time. He wanted to see me break. The stone lion entered the circle, its eyes lit orange. My creatures were already down nearly a third of their mass from the first 2 stages. I had one choice: spend more experienced water or lose publicly. I had brought a sealed metal flask. Inside was the most valuable resource I owned, the original wolf water. 1 kilogram, 100 grams remained, 10 rebirths, warehouse hunts, practice fights, fire fear, human movement prediction, everything. Elin saw the flask from the railing. She knew what it meant. I poured only 200 grams into a chilled basin. Then I melted 1 wolf, 2 birds, and 4 beetles into it. The crowd watched me work, while the stone lion waited under control lock. I carved quickly. Not a wolf, not a bird. A long, low creature with 4 legs, wide claws, and a narrow head. I used a freezing plate from 1 tortoise to harden it. The new familiar woke carrying fragments from all the others. It was not strong, but it had hunted rats, watched shoulders, flown around beams, blocked exits, protected walls, and feared heat. It had the strangest education in the academy. Dorian released the lion. The stone beast charged. My new familiar did not challenge it. It ran. The crowd shouted in disappointment. Varric laughed. Then the creature ran directly across the meltwater left by our shattered defenders. The lion followed. My tortoises moved to the edge of the wet area. Cold flowed outward. The floor froze. The lion's front paws slid. My familiar turned sharply because bird memory understood direction changes. The lion could not. It struck the boundary wall shoulder first. The crowd roared. Not enough. The lion recovered. It attacked again. My creature waited longer this time. Too long. A stone paw clipped its rear body. Half of it shattered. The stands gasped. It dragged itself forward with 2 legs. The lion raised a paw. I saw Elin grip the railing. Then the wounded familiar did something I had not ordered. It bit the lion's ankle. Not to damage stone. To hold position. The chair-biting tortoise memory. I almost laughed. The lion pulled forward. The familiar let its melting body stretch across the joint. Water flowed into the moving gap between stone plates. The remaining tortoises cooled it. The water froze inside the joint. The lion's rear leg locked. It tried to turn. The frozen joint held. The lion fell. The entire arena went silent. My familiar, now little more than a head and front legs, crawled onto the lion's neck and sat there, exactly like the first wolf had sat behind Bren's boots. Dorian stared. Mara stared. Silas stood. Varric was no longer smiling. Dorian raised his hand. Combat stage passed. The arena exploded. More than 1,000 voices hit at once. Students pounded the railings. Warehouse workers screamed. Tobin lifted a sack of flour over his head for reasons known only to him. The ranking board flashed. My contribution score jumped high enough to move from 76 to 48. 48. From last place to the top 50 in 4 days. Third shock. Then Silas descended to the arena floor. The cheering slowly stopped. He examined the shattered ice, the frozen lion joint, and my nearly empty veteran flask. "How much did that victory cost you?" he asked. I liked the question. 200 grams of veteran water directly, more from the bodies used during the test, roughly 600 grams of trained material across the full event. The crowd heard through the arena crystals. "Can you restore it?" "I can train new water, but the lost mass is gone." The audience finally understood that every clever familiar they cheered for consumed a limited resource. Silas nodded. "A real cost makes the method easier to regulate." Then he continued. "The sculpture club remains open. Calder retains ownership of his constructs and meltwater. No confiscation without consent or a safety violation witnessed by faculty." The warehouse workers cheered again. Dorian's face changed only slightly. He had lost publicly in front of his superior. But Silas was not finished. "Dorian, your concern was valid. Your chosen remedy was excessive. Record the correction." Dorian had to say it in front of everyone. The confiscation order was excessive. 1,000 people heard him. Another public correction. I did not smile. I did not need to. The board did that for me. Then Varek stepped onto the arena floor. His white coat was spotless despite the wet stone around us. "Impressive," he said, "for an academy demonstration." The crowd quieted. He looked at the ranking board. Top 48 locally. Do not confuse that with capital standard. There it was. Third rung. He raised one hand. A black metal case floated down from the faculty seats and opened. Inside lay a tournament invitation. "The inter-academy qualifier begins tomorrow. First-year entrants normally require top 20 rank. I am issuing a discretionary challenge slot." Bren shouted from the rail. "He is rank 48. Varek looked at him as if surprised furniture could speak. "Exactly." He turned back to me. "Calder may enter if he accepts the penalty condition. If he loses before the final round, his special qualification is revoked and his academy rank resets to the position he held after the entrance exam review." 159. A massive status risk. "If I reach the final? Your qualifier result becomes permanent. Prize?" Some students laughed. Varek did not. 100 gold and direct entry to the capital tournament. Enough money to transform the club and enough status to make future confiscation harder. I looked at my veteran flask. 900 grams remained, less than half of the original 2 kilograms. Tomorrow I would need to fight multiple rounds. I looked at Varek. "I accept." The arena exploded again. Varek smiled. "Good. Try not to become a puddle before lunch." That night the club was full for the first time in years. Not with members, with ice. Tobin delivered purified water as payment for future cooling work. Mara unlocked the old ceremonial molds. Bren appeared at the door, claimed he was only there to inspect competition strategy, then spent an hour carrying buckets. Aylin cooked in a small pot over a safe heating stone near the stairs. Thick stew with beef, carrots, potatoes, and dark gravy. Fresh bread sat beside it. Every familiar stayed on the opposite side of the room because by now, fire avoidance had become a cultural tradition. I carved until my hands cramped. Not 20 creatures, 50. Mostly clean water. Small memory seeds in each, birds for vision, beetles for terrain, wolves for timing, tortoises for cooling, simple forms, simple jobs. Elin watched the growing army. "You cannot control 50 separately." "I know." "Then what are you doing?" I looked at the basin holding mixed meltwater from the day's test. The specialist memories had begun to overlap, not perfectly, enough. "I am not going to control 50. The floor cracked. Every ice creature stopped. The drain flashed blue. This time the light did not vanish. A white line appeared beneath the floor and spread outward under the entire room. Then another. Then hundreds. They formed angles, walls, stairs. A foundation plan made of memory lines inside ancient ice. Mara went pale. "That is not the current academy." I stared at the glowing geometry below us. She was right. The walls did not match our building, and somewhere deep under the arena, an enormous shape turned over in its sleep. The 5th day began with 50 ice familiars standing in perfect silence while an older version of the academy glowed beneath the basement floor. I had a tournament in 3 hours, 900 grams of veteran water left, and a foundation that apparently remembered architecture. I chose the tournament first. Ancient mysteries could wait until I had 100 gold. The qualifier filled the central arena before sunrise. 64 first-year entrants stood around the floor. Varek oversaw the event from the judges' platform. Silas sat beside him. Dorian handled rules. Mara watched the arena tunnel. Tobin had somehow acquired a front row seat and a paper cone full of roasted nuts. Elin held my veteran flask beside the entrance. 900 grams, she said. Do not let me spend more than 500. Even to win? Especially to win. A tournament can happen again. That memory line cannot. She nodded. That was why I trusted her with it. My first opponent summoned a horned cat twice the size of Bren's lizard. I used 6 birds and 4 beetles. No veteran water. The cat chased movement, so the birds crossed paths over a patch the beetles had frozen. It turned too hard, slid, and crossed the boundary in 47 seconds. The crowd laughed and cheered. First prize, 2 gold. My academy rank moved from 48 to 42. Strength, money, status. All 3 rose before breakfast. The second opponent used a stone ape. It smashed 3 wolves and cost me 180 grams of ordinary trained water. On its 6th heavy swing, a wolf redirected the arm into a boundary post. The ape stumbled out. Another 2 gold, rank 39. The third opponent was a wind serpent that never touched the floor. My first flock shattered in less than a minute. The crowd changed tone. People started saying my trick had finally met its limit. Varek smiled. I spent 50 grams of veteran water. 4 new birds woke with old hunting patterns, shoulder prediction, and movement memory from shapes that had never flown. They still could not outrun the serpent, so they stopped racing it. They led it through the hanging arena banners, 1 cut left, 1 cut right. A third severed a rope. The banner dropped over the serpent, and the 4th bird froze the cloth to the floor, immobilized. The arena exploded. Varek stopped smiling. 5 more gold, 9 gold earned in the tournament, rank 31. Then the bracket gave me Bren. He entered with his red lizard and looked at me like the universe had repeated a joke at his expense. If I lose to your ice again, I am transferring. Choose somewhere warm. The crowd laughed. This time he was ready. He gave no shoulder signals. His lizard heated the floor before every step, destroying my ice patches. 1 wolf melted before reaching it. 2 beetles died under a heat wave. A bird burst into steam above its back. The crowd started shouting Bren's name. Good. He had learned. That gave me something predictable. Every time the lizard heated the floor, it waited 3 breaths before moving. I sent a thick tortoise into the center. Heat. 3 breaths. The tortoise retreated. Again. 3 breaths. Again. On the 4th approach, the tortoise opened its hollow shell. 6 beetles jumped out. The arena screamed. They had ridden inside the cold shell, protected from the heat. 2 froze the lizard's rear claws. 2 climbed its tail. 2 ran straight at Bren. He stepped backward on instinct. His heel crossed the summoner boundary. The judge's crystal flashed. Match over. For 1 second, Bren stared at the line behind him. Then the arena laughed so hard Silas covered his mouth. I had not beaten Bren's familiar. I had trained Bren to beat himself. He looked at me. I am not transferring. Good. Moving is expensive. He started laughing too. The loss still hurt him, but the humiliation no longer made him cruel. He had adapted. I respected that. Quarterfinal prize 10 gold, tournament earnings 19, academy rank 24. That number mattered. I had crossed the normal qualification line. Varek's special penalty could no longer throw me back to the lower ranks. The stands began chanting it. 24, 24. 5 days earlier, they had counted me down to last place. Now they counted me upward. Then Varek stepped onto the arena floor. 1 semi-final entrant has withdrawn, he announced. The highest-ranked reserve may fill the slot. He removed his white coat. Combat gear was underneath. The arena went silent. Silas stood. You are not enrolled here. Committee rules use combat age classification, not enrollment. I qualify. Calder may refuse. His capital invitation remains. He was giving me a safe exit. That made his motive obvious. He no longer needed to damage my rank. He wanted to damage the story. He wanted everyone to watch the local miracle stop the moment the capital appeared. I looked at Elin. She touched the veteran flask. 500 limit. I remember. I entered the arena. The crowd roared. Varek summoned a white-armored stag taller than a horse. Crystal antlers branched above its head. Cold rolled from its body. For the first time, my familiars did not melt near an enemy. They froze harder. That was worse. The stag controlled cold better than I did. It froze beetles to the floor before they moved. Birds became clear blocks in midair. A wolf locked solid from nose to tail. My own element became a cage. Varek walked behind the stag. Your method depends on changing shape. Frozen water cannot change. Correct. He had studied me. The stag stamped once. Every remaining small familiar froze solid. The crowd went quiet. Yield, Varric said. I looked at the trapped creatures, birds, beetles, wolves, tortoises, different shapes, different memories, all connected by the same rule. Memory belonged to water, not to shape. I opened every reserve container except the veteran flask. Ellen understood before anyone else. She and Mara rolled the insulated barrels to the boundary. I broke the seals. More than 40 kilograms of cold water flooded the arena. The front rows lifted their feet and shouted. Varric frowned. His stag froze the entire flood instantly, exactly what I wanted. The separate familiars were now trapped inside one continuous sheet of ice. I placed both palms on it and carved lines through the connected mass. 4 legs became 2. Bird bodies became joints. Beetles became armor plates. Tortoise shells became a chest. Wolf bodies formed hands and feet. Clean water filled the gaps. The whole sheet rose. A titan more than 6 meters tall stood in the arena. One shoulder was larger than the other. Apparently, the oversized ear of my first wolf had become a family tradition. For 2 seconds, nobody made a sound. Then the titan moved without waiting for a separate command. Not one mind. A coalition of memories. Varric's stag released a freezing wave. The titan's outer layer hardened. It kept walking. The counterspell had become armor. The first real shock crossed Varric's face. His stag charged. The titan lowered one shoulder with tortoise memory and took the impact. Crystal antlers punched into its chest. Beetle memory hands locked around them. The stag tried to pull back. Wolf memory predicted the retreat. Bird memory handled balance. The titan stepped sideways, lifted, and threw the stag across the boundary. The white beast struck the safety barrier and vanished in a storm of frost. The arena became pure noise. Students jumped onto benches. Tobin threw his roasted nuts into the air. Bren climbed onto the rail and shouted until Dorian dragged him down. Aelin did not cheer first. She looked at the titan, then at me. She wanted the cost. It was far lower than expected. Varric's cold had preserved the mass instead of melting it. I had spent almost none of the veteran reserve. The judge's crystal flashed. Victory. Public. Unavoidable. My academy rank jumped from 24 to 17. Varric stared at the board, then he faced the audience. I underestimated the method, he said. The crowd reacted immediately. His jaw tightened, and I underestimated Calder. That was enough. The Capitol representative had corrected himself in front of everyone who had watched me fail 5 days earlier. The final opponent summoned a fire ram. Against my connected titan, the match was short. The ram melted the outer shell with each charge, but the titan learned the rhythm. On the 4th attack, it caught the horns, turned, and placed the ram outside the boundary without breaking it. The ram sat there looking confused. The arena laughed. Dorian called the final. First place, 100 gold, direct capital entry, academy rank 12, from 312 to 12 in 5 days. The public board displayed both numbers. Nobody needed me to explain the difference. My strength had risen from one clumsy wolf to a titan built from 50 trained fragments. My cash had risen from 1 copper coin Bren threw at me to more than 100 gold in prizes and contracts. My status had risen from last place to the top 12. All 3 scales had moved. Then the titan stopped celebrating. It looked down. Every white memory line inside its body brightened at once. They extended through the stone floor, into the glacier beneath the academy. A crack split the arena. The cheering died. Blue lines spread between my boots. Then hundreds more appeared, forming walls, stairs, towers, and corridors inside the ice below. The titan put one hand on the floor. The bond hit me like cold water. Not fear, recognition. The glacier had frozen, melted and frozen again for centuries. Every cycle had left memory. My sight changed. For one heartbeat, another academy stood around me. Black towers, a square arena, no windows in the central hall. Then another version replaced it. White stone, ice bridges, a tower beneath the ground. Then wooden halls around a frozen lake. Then a fortress. Then ruins. Then nothing but ice and a circular door below the arena. I pulled my hand away. The vision vanished. Everyone else had seen the blue lines, but not the forms. Silas came down from the judge's platform. Mara was already kneeling beside the crack. Dorian forgot the tournament completely. Elin reached me first. What did you see? The academy, different versions of it. The floor dropped several centimeters near the center. Cold air rushed upward. Something below had opened. Dorian ordered the arena evacuated. For once, nobody argued. Neris arrived from the archive wing carrying sealed maps. He spread the current academy plan beside the glowing floor. It matched the newest memory lines. He opened an older reconstruction map. That matched another layer. A third map matched another. His ink-stained hands started shaking. "These plans are separated by fires, collapses, and wars," he said. "The academy was rebuilt many times." "On the same glacier," I said. He nodded. The rule remained simple. Experience survived in water. My wolf had remembered jumps and attacks. The glacier had remembered buildings. Every reconstruction had melted part of the foundation and frozen it into a new form. Neris opened the oldest map. Almost nothing was drawn except the outer boundary and one circle beneath the arena. No gates, no roads, no entrance. Silas read the faded note beside the circle. His voice went quiet. "This is not a school plan." Neris translated the old line aloud. "Containment structure. Do not permit full thaw." Nobody spoke. The academy had not originally been built on a glacier. It had been built around something inside it. Then my Titan moved. I had not commanded it. Its lower legs were melting into the cracked floor, and the water was flowing toward the circular door. I ordered it to stop. Most of the smaller memory fragments obeyed. The Titan did not. It pulled toward the glacier like an animal recognizing a scent. That was the fifth consequence. Enough repeated experience could create preference, maybe even will. Aelin handed me the veteran flask without a word. I poured 50 grams onto a cold section of floor and carved a tiny wolf. It froze. It woke with one ear larger than the other. The oldest line. My first failure. My first victory. The wolf looked at the Titan and barked once. The Titan stopped. Every memory line inside the giant shifted toward the little body. The oldest recognizable pattern had become an anchor. I pointed away from the crack. The wolf moved. The Titan followed. Slowly, the giant dragged itself back until its meltwater flowed into the arena collection trench instead of the glacier. Mara slammed the emergency seal over the crack. Dorian activated the locking crystals. Silas closed the arena. We had stopped the contact. For now. By evening, the official results still stood. First place, 100 gold, rank 12. The Sculpture Club received formal recognition and a yearly grant of 30 gold. Tobin expanded my cooling work to 300 silver per week. Mara secured new freezing cabinets. Neris moved copies of the reconstruction maps into our basement. The world had reacted. The joke from the first exam was now an academy project. That night, we ate together in the club. Aelin brought rich beef broth with soft dumplings, green onion, roasted garlic, and crisp fried dough. Bren arrived with a practice notebook and pretended he was there only because the corridor was warmer. Mara drank tea beside the repaired cabinet. The tiny wolf sat on the table, leaned toward the steaming soup, remembered every bad experience it had ever had with heat, and retreated to the far edge. Aelin laughed. "Still the smartest one?" "Oldest. Not the same thing." Bren pointed at it. "That thing has beaten me 3 times. I refuse to be judged by it." "Then stop losing to it." Mara nearly spilled her tea. For a few minutes, the room felt like a home. 5 days earlier, I had collected my first familiar from a puddle while 300 students laughed. Now I had money, a recognized club, a capital invitation, a top 12 rank, and people who understood that every lesson my ice learned cost real water. One cheat. One rule. Water remembered. The problem was that the world contained much more water than I had expected. After midnight, Aelin and I stayed beside the sealed drain. Neris had left the oldest map open on the table. The little wolf walked to the seal and scratched once. Something below scratched back. Once. Pause. Twice. Pause. 3 times. The wolf's memory lines brightened. The sequence repeated. Aelin whispered, "Is it copying him?" No. The next pattern came before the wolf moved. Once. Twice. 3 times. The wolf answered. The glacier was not copying us. It was teaching. I placed my palm on the cold floor. A final image entered my mind. Not an old academy, a future one. The school stood as an enormous creature of ice and stone. Towers rose from its back like spines. The central arena was an eye. Dormitories formed ribs. Outer walls had become folded legs. Then the image vanished. Aelin saw my face. "What did you see?" I looked at the tiny wolf, then at the floor under the academy. For 5 days, I had been teaching ice how to remember being alive. The glacier beneath us had been practicing for centuries, and now it had finally remembered how to stand up.